I'm talking to you. I'm Mrs. Bolden, and this is Introduction to Anatomy and Physiology. And we're going to talk about part one of this series today, requirements of an organism. Well, if we're going to study anatomy and physiology, one of the first things we need to do is to define what anatomy is. Anatomy is the study of the structure of body parts, and if you're taking human anatomy, it would be the structure of human body parts. Physiology is a study of the function of those body parts, and while physiology is probably, I kind of enjoy that a wee bit more than anatomy, you really can't understand physiology until you understand anatomy. They go together, kind of like peas and carrots, to quote Forrest Gump. So anatomy, study of structure. In order to understand how those body parts work, we need to understand the structure. In order to understand the function of them, again, we need to understand the structure. Okay, so you really can't study anatomy without studying some physiology. You know, you can study physiology, but if you don't know the anatomy first, then it's a little bit of a lose-lose situation there. So first thing we're going to talk about is the requirements of an organism. You as an organism, as a matter of fact, all organisms have certain requirements to remain alive. So one of the big ones is water, and most of the time a lot of people walk around in their lives kind of on the dehydrated side, and that's not really good for your cells. The reason that you need a good supply of water, and when I say a good supply of water, the people in the know, physicians, recommend 8-ounce glasses of water a day. That's a lot of water. And as you know, if you drink a lot of water, you're going to have to pee a lot. But that's actually kind of a good thing, because that means that your cells not only are well hydrated, but they have an opportunity to get rid of all of that waste products that's been building up there. So cells need water for metabolism. Metabolism is all the reactions in the body. And most of those reactions have to take place in a water environment. So it's really important that you can dissolve the nutrients up into water so that they can be transported, because trying to transport solid, granular sugar that you put on your Wheaties in the morning through your bloodstream is not really going to be happening there. Not so good. So speaking of transporting things, water is really, really important for transportation of substances throughout your body. Nutrients, oxygen, carbon dioxide, waste, all kinds of stuff. All of that gets dissolved up in water, in a water solution. So that really kind of helps things out. It's also really important for temperature regulation. And usually when I teach this unit, it's the fall. It's the first one we learn about, and it's when we get back to school. And usually we have about 2 weeks of just unbearable hot weather during that time. And so a lot of people, because their body temperatures are elevated, they're doing a lot of sweating. And the reason that you sweat when your body temperature goes up is because water, if you remember your chemistry, has very high specific heat, which means that when you lose water, it takes that heat with you. And as soon as your body puts that water on the surface of your body, then it can evaporate and take the heat away. So that's a cooling mechanism. So water is really important for that. As a matter of fact, when on a really, really hot day, you can actually lose, if you're working outside, one of those guys that are working on the road crews, tarring and things like that, you can lose a tremendous amount of water in one day. And I think, I may be wrong, but I think it's almost 7 liters of water. So that would be 3.5 2-liter bottles of soda that you could lose in water. So it's really, really important when it's hot that you keep drinking water so that you can keep everything balanced, because if you start dehydrating, then all those reactions in your body stop happening, and it makes you feel really, really crappy when that happens. The second requirement is food. And back when you were in biology, you learned that all organisms have to have a source of energy, and food happens to be our source of energy. We eat food. We're not plants. We're not autotrophs. We don't stand out in a field when it's sunshine out and feel less hungry. So we have to take in chemicals, and hopefully they're tasty chemicals. And to get energy from them, we also use those chemicals in our food for raw materials like protein in fish and legumes, which are like peas and beans and things like that. Proteins in those types of foods we use for muscles and for enzymes, and we also use those proteins to help control reactions in our body. Hey, look, it's actually kind of a famous drawing, and I can't remember who did it, but that's what you look like with your skin off if you were like really super duper buff. So the third thing, moving right along, the third thing is oxygen. We as organisms need oxygen. The things that we do need oxygen in order for us to break down that food to get the energy out of it. We're not anaerobic organisms. Anaerobic organisms, maybe you remember from biology, don't require any oxygen. As a matter of fact, they die in the presence of oxygen. So what do we need oxygen for? For cellular respiration. And again, probably you learned about this in biology. Cellular respiration has nothing to do with breathing. Has nothing to do with breathing. Nothing at all. Cellular respiration have anything to do with breathing? No, not at all. I tell you that like 15 times because invariably on the freshman biology test, when I say, what is cellular respiration? Somebody always says it's cell breathing. So, does cellular respiration have anything to do with breathing? Absolutely not. What does it have to do with? It has to do with breaking down glucose and other sugars to release the energy from them. So we need oxygen for that to happen. So again, nota bene, NB means nota bene. It's Latin for note well, or as my English teacher in high school, pay attention, is what she said that meant. So cellular respiration has nothing to do with breathing. Absolutely nothing to do with breathing. Now, I said it like 6 or 7 times, so please don't tell me it has anything to do with breathing. Send me right over the edge. The next requirement for living things is heat. We need to maintain our body temperature, and the reason for that is it determines the rate of reactions. If you've been through a chemistry class somewhere along the line, you know that if you add heat to a reaction, it makes the molecules go faster, and so the reactions happen at a greater rate. If you chill something, the molecules in the atoms go much slower, so the reaction slows down. So the temperature is very, very important. Pressure is also really important to living organisms, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm not laying on a bed of nails here. Why is that so important? Well, we live in an environment where there's a huge column of air on top of our heads and pushing down on us. Fortunately, we happen to be pushing back on the atmosphere. But that atmospheric pressure is the reason why we're able to get oxygen to go into our lungs and to have air leave our lungs. There's also other kinds of pressures that are important, like osmotic pressure. That's kind of a fancy word for diffusion, which is how most substances move through membranes and through different types of cells. So pressure is applying a force to a particular area. You remember that from physics. So why is it important? It's important for breathing, for moving substances, all kinds of stuff. Okay, so the last thing we need to talk about is homeostasis, and that's maintaining a stable internal environment. There's lots and lots of examples of how you do this on a daily basis, and you don't even have to think about it if you are a normal, healthy human being. So in order to maintain a stable internal environment, you're going to have to use a little bit of your energy, hence the need for more food to supply that energy. If you aren't able to maintain homeostasis, it could mean death. So your body has a couple of ways that it takes care of it, and they both come under the umbrella of homeostatic mechanism. It's a self-regulating control system. So in all homeostatic mechanisms, there are three basic parts. There are receptors or input devices, and in your body, they're mostly nerves, either internal nerves or peripheral nerves, touch receptors, heat receptors, things like that, but they're nerves. And then you have a set point, which is whatever the value is supposed to be. For example, there are receptors in your body at different places that say your body temperature needs to be at 98.6. That's a set point. Your brain understands that you're supposed to be at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. By the way, that's just an average. Don't get all tweaked out because you normally, if you're feeling completely healthy, yours is just 98 or maybe it's 99. 98.6 is an average for human beings. Some people run a little warmer, some people a little less. Don't, unless it's like vastly different from what you normally are, then you're okay. You don't have to worry about it. So anyway, so you have a set point, and then you have effectors which cause a response to make a change. So receptors, those are the input devices. The set point, somewhere somebody says, yep, it's good, or nope, it's not good. This is what it should be. And then you have things that happen, the effectors. They cause the response. So with an example, if you are really cold and you're like most teenagers who refuse to wear a jacket in the middle of the wintertime, you're standing out there, the bus is late, and your body temperature is going down. And so without even thinking about it, the set point is been exceeded, or it isn't quite at the set point in this case. So the effectors start to kick in. Your brain says, hey, you're cold. And it sends messages to your muscles, and they cause tiny little muscle contractions, which we call shivering. And what that does is when your muscles contract, it causes your body temperature to rise. So that's one way that your body is trying to get back to that 98.6. Okay, so let's give you an example of a homeostatic mechanism. So there's positive feedback mechanisms, and then there's negative feedback mechanisms. I'm going to talk to you about a negative feedback mechanism right now. So you're like most teenagers, and you love the Doritos or Cheetos or, really salty foods, and you get yourself a big family-sized bag of Doritos, we'll say. Insert whatever favorite chip you have. So you're eating the Doritos, and yeah, you're going along, and everything is fine. And about halfway through the bag, you're like, yeah, jeez, so what do you want? Oh, you probably want a little bit of water or Mountain Dew or something, to wash that down. So when you're eating the Doritos, because they're very, very salty, the receptor cells in your mouth dry out, because you remember from biology, with osmosis, water goes from where there's a high concentration to where there's a low concentration. If you're eating a lot of really, really salty Doritos, the water's going to come out of the cells of your mouth and go into the mush that is the Doritos in your mouth, because there's not much water there. So when those receptor cells dry out, the hydration set point is exceeded. The receptor nerve in your mouth sends a message to your brain saying, hey, it's getting kind of dry down here. And then your brain goes, whoop, 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 whoop. Hydration set point exceeded. And then the next thing that it does is it makes you thirsty, and you want to drink some water or some other type of liquid to kind of get rid of this dryness in your mouth. So you do that. Do you drink forever? No, you don't. When the receptor becomes rehydrated again, guess what? Magically, that feeds back to your brain. Your brain says, oh, the hydration set point is okay, so you can stop drinking because the receptors are rehydrated. So it turns off your drinking. That's a very good example of a homeostatic mechanism that probably all of us have experienced at one point. Another example, and it's not just in your body that you have these, another example of a negative feedback mechanism is the thermostat in your house. And you might have one of these things on the wall if you have oil heat or maybe gas heat or electric heat. And what happens with this is you set it at whatever temperature you want. Now, when the temperature goes below what you set it at, there's a little sensor in there that turns on the furnace and says, okay, we need some heat. The temperature is too low. So it turns on the heat. As the temperature in the room rises and the sensor in the thermostat picks up on that increase in temperature, then it's going to feed back to the furnace saying, okay, you can shut it off now. It's the same kind of thing as the Doritos drinking water mechanism. It's the same kind of thing, but it happens in your house as well. And here is a nice little diagram that kind of shows you the negative feedback loop and an example of the negative feedback loop. And this is the same example as I used at the very beginning with your temperature. Okay, well, thanks for joining me. Have a great day.